Hello, 594 and 692. We are now in our experimental designs module, and one of the things that we're going to talk about that are kind of a key feature of experimental designs is this idea of random sampling versus random assignment. You won't hear us referring to this in our correlation studies because we're not trying to control for our extraneous variables in those. So we are going to talk about it in terms of what it means for experimental designs and quasi-experimental designs. Quasi-experimental designs are very close to what we talk about um, when we talk about experimental designs, but they kind of have a little catch to them. So for the sake of time on this video, I'm going to focus this video on defining random sample or random selection. You can use them interchangeably in this class, and random assignment. And then in a follow-up video, I'll break down how this applies to experimental and experimental designs and how those two differ from each other. And as I'm sure you could guess at this point, it has to do with random sampling and random assignment. So in a very general sense, random sampling or random selection has to do with how we pull people for our study from the population as a whole. The reason why we do it is we want everybody in our potential sample. Now, the sample, of course, are the people that we have selected to be in our study. We want the people that are in our sample to be most reflective of the population as a whole. We don't want one group to be overrepresented. We want it to be as representative of the population as a whole. And we do that by collecting a large sample if possible, but definitely by collecting a random sample. So a random sample helps us feel that we have a good shot of representing everybody that's in the population. So if everyone in the population of interest has an equal chance of being selected to be in this study, then this study has used random selection or random sampling. Random assignment is after you've already done the random selection. So in random selection, you've got a ton of people in your population who have not been identified or enrolled in your study yet. There's just people out there, and you're trying to decide which people you're even going to bring into the building. Random assignment is you've already decided who you're using from the population. You've already selected your sample. Now you're deciding which group they're going to be in. Which group are they going to be assigned to? So random assignment, just like the term sounds, we're doing this randomly. So we want to just randomly put people in group A and group B, or group 1 and group 2. We don't want to pick and choose who goes into which group. The idea here being the same as the concept that random sampling uses. So the idea that by randomly sampling people from the population, I have a representation of the population. Random assignment works on the idea that if I randomly assign them to these two different groups, the groups should be relatively equal. So in this kind of example here, you can see how they're looking at gender and some other icons that I don't know what SO stands for here in FR, but you can see that they're organizing people by gender. By randomly assigning people into these two groups, we're hoping to get at some sense of equal presentation in each one. So I'm hoping that I have just as many male students as female students in both groups. If I'm working with people, maybe this is a weight loss study, whenever I randomly assign them to the two groups, I'm hoping that based on statistics and probability, I should have just as many people with a predisposition for obesity in this group as I do in this group. So all of those factors that could make people different are balanced out between these two groups. And that's going to come into our concept of the control group later on, and how the control group influences this whole process and helps us understand what is going on in our study and whether or not our variable, our treatment variable, whatever it is that we're trying to test, is actually having an impact. So just to break it down a little bit further, Random selection, remember this is the same thing as random sampling. We want to consider who are we generalizing to. So the population, the theoretical population. So if I want to generalize to college students, then my theoretical population is all of the college students in whatever country I'm interested in. Maybe I want to generalize it to American college students. So my theoretical population is all of those students who are enrolled in college in the US. Okay, so my population isn't every single person in the US. Specifically, it's looking at people in the US who are in college. My study population is actually the people I can get access to. We're going to talk about this more in the survey design section. We're also going to talk more about the sampling frame when we get to survey design, as these terms kind of come up more in that particular piece. But for right now, study population and sampling frame are going to be who do we actually have access to. So just because my theoretical population is all of the college students in the U.S., I don't necessarily have access to all of them. And then finally, the sample. So from my population, I tried to get a list. So from my theoretical population, all the college students in the US, I tried to get a list of as many of them as possible. And from that list, I randomly selected people to be in my study. Those people I've selected are my sample. So at this point, I have conducted random sampling or random selection. So now I know who in the population is going to be in my actual study. But now I need to do random assignment. So random assignment, again, is randomly assigning individuals to conditions or to groups. By conditions or groups, I mean that maybe group 1 is getting the treatment and group 2 isn't getting the treatment. The people that I'm assigning are the ones that I already decided on here, the ones that I randomly pulled from my overarching population. Now I'm going to put them in one of these groups. Maybe I have 2 groups, maybe I have 3, maybe I have 4. Regardless of how it works, you're going to randomly assign people amongst all of those groups. The point again of random assignment is to make those groups equal, to distribute variability between the groups and conditions. So I should have just as many gifted students in this group as in this group. I should have just as many international students in this group as in this group. So my 2 groups are now equal, theoretically, if I did random assignment. Does that mean they're going to be 100% equal, that I'm going to have just as many exactly female students in this group as in this group? No, there's going to be some slight fluctuation, but the point is that overall, statistically speaking, these two are relatively equal. And that is something you will cover in your statistics courses on variance, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. So we're not looking for them to be perfectly equal, we just want them to be statistically equal. So of course, different from random selection, which is selection of participants at random. So just to debrief, I start with this group of people. I randomly select who's going to be in my study. Once they're in my study, I randomly assign them to one of 2 groups. Take a minute to read over this, make sure you understand this concept. It will come back on our exam, and you will also need it to understand our next video, which is going to be looking at the differences between experimental and quasi-experimental designs. I'll see you guys there.